I think we live in a great country. It's not a perfect country by far. We have our problems in America, but it's a great land to live in. I mean, think about it. We have an abundance of food. I can't imagine that any of us here this morning lacks food. We probably all eat a little bit too much food. And as a matter of fact, if you have a faint hint of garlic wafting around in this room today, it's because of us last night at the celebration of love. So it's not the neighbor necessarily sitting next to you, it's the collection of all of us who ate the garlic food last night. So I guess we are, odorous or odious, or we stink. Yeah. We stink. But we truly do have an overabundance of food. We really do. I don't think any of us lack eating anything. And we do in this country also have a reasonable security. Now, I understand we probably lock our doors at night. We lock our cars when we go to the mall. I understand that. But all in all, compared to other nations, there's a reasonable amount of security that we do have. And because we have an overabundance of things, not just food, but things, material things, and we have reasonable security in this country, I think that trips us up and in a sense lulls us into a sleep, into a slumber. And I think what it does is it moves us as believers in Jesus Christ because of an abundance of things and a reasonable security. I think what it does is it forces us or it moves us to live passive, timid Christian lives. Things are going well. I want to remain safe. I don't want to rock the boat. I don't like controversies whatsoever. I like to be safe and I like to know exactly what my box is that I'm living in because I have an overabundance and a reasonable sense of security. I tend to get passive and I tend to get timid in my Christian walk. I want to maintain the status quo. And as Ronald Reagan said, status quo simply means the mess that we're in. We want to live a quiet kind of life. And I think because of the things that we have and the reasons of security that we have, it tends to make us very passive and timid people. There was a study done in World War II fighter pilots, ace fighter pilots of World War II. The guy's name is E. Paul Torrance, a doctor who made this research. And as he researched the fighter pilots, the aces, the top of the cream of the fighter pilots in World War II, he found that there was one characteristic that they all shared. Every one of them. There was many of them that overlapped, but this one they all shared. And the one characteristic that every one of the ace fighter pilots of World War II shared was they were risk takers. They were always pushing and testing the limits of their abilities. They weren't satisfied with the way that they were. They were always going a step further. They were trying to get outside of the box, if you want to say. And as he did this study, he found that these people were resistant to accidents and they actually had a higher survivor rate than those pilots that flew in World War II who always played it safe. They were risk takers. And he comes to this conclusion, Dr. Torrance, he says this: living itself is a risky business. If we spend half as much time learning how to take risks as we spend avoiding them, we wouldn't have nearly so much to fear in life. Risk takers. There's this little saying, I'm sure it's not true, but listen to this. It's not true about a person, but it was written like this. There was a very cautious man who never laughed or played. He never risked. He never tried, he never sang or prayed. And when he one day passed away, his insurance was denied. For since he never really lived, they claimed he never really died. I don't want us to get to the end of our lives when our energy is consumed and we are laying on our deathbed and we look back at our Christian life and say, I wish I would have risked this. I wish I would have stepped out by faith and I wish I would have obeyed God's calling and I wish I would have done this right here, whatever this is. I don't want us to regret our life that we're living right now when we get to the end of it. I don't want us to be passive, timid Christians. Don't want us to be status quo kind of people. Now, when I say a risk taker, I'm not talking about now this is just my opinion, someone who jumps off El Capitan with just a parachute has a tendency to get blown back into the mountain and die. I'm not talking about necessarily like that kind of risk. What I'm talking about is stepping out and doing what God has called us to do, knowing God has called us to do it, and saying, although I feel uncomfortable at this may be pushing me outside of my comfort zone, I'm willing to risk because God has asked me to do it. That's what I'm talking about. The Bible is full of men and women who lived passionate lives and risked great things for God. Did something great for Him. Wouldn't we like to risk something great for God? Wouldn't we like to say at the end of our life that we took that chance? Although it pushed us outside of our zone, we took that chance and took that risk because God called us to do that. I don't want us to get to the end and regret what we left undone. And the person we're going to be introduced today in the Bible out of Joshua chapter 14 is just one of these people who understood what it means to risk something great for God. There are tons of people we could have chosen, but in our series of Joshua, we come to Caleb in chapter 14. Here's a guy who truly understands what it means to step out and do something great for God because he knew who his God was. Now you're probably saying, well, wait a second, last time we were in chapter 10. We're skipping so many chapters here in Joshua. That's true. The last half of chapter 10 and all of chapter 11 and all of chapter 12 are dealing with battles that the children of Israel fought, battles and victories. So if we would have read through them, we would have read about one battle here and one battle here and a victory here and a victory there, and it would just repeat itself over and over again. So we're going to skip all of those battles in chapter 10, 11, and 12. In chapter 13, there's a brief discussion of the parts of the land that has yet to be conquered. There are still some peoples they have not driven out yet. And then at the end of chapter 13, they start dividing the land up just like God promised the children of Israel. This is your inheritance. This is the promised land. So they start dividing the land up. And here in chapter 13, on the east side of the Jordan. So the 2.5 tribes are on the east side of the Jordan. They begin dividing that land up. When we come to chapter 14 right here, the first part of it, they're going to start talking about, okay, it's time to divide the land up on the west side of the Jordan. So verses 1 through 6 introduces this idea of now we're going to divide the inheritance up, that we're going to give the people the land that God had promised to them. And then we come to the character Caleb in verse number 6 of chapter 14. We're going to be introduced to this guy named Caleb and exactly what it was that he risked for God, what made his faith so great. In verses 6 through 8, I want you to take a look at here. We see Caleb had faith in the power of God. Caleb had faith in the power of God. Look at verses 6 through 8. Then the people of Judah came to Joshua at Gilgal, and Caleb, the son of Jephunneh, the Kenizzite, said to him, "You know what the Lord said to Moses, the man of God, in Kadesh Barnea concerning you and me." Now remember, he's talking to Joshua. When the 12 spies went out, 10 came back with a bad report, 2 had a good report, Joshua and Caleb. And those 2 are the only 2 that made it to the promised land. So Joshua and Caleb have this really close relationship. They've been through a lot together. The same promise that was made to Joshua was a promise that was made to Caleb. You're going to make it to the promised land. I promise you'll get the inheritance. So there's a special relationship between Joshua and Caleb. I was 40 years old when Moses, the servant of the Lord, sent me from Kadesh Barnea to spy out the land. And I brought him word again as it was in my heart. But my brothers who went up with me made the heart of the people melt. Yet I wholly followed the Lord my God. And Moses swore on that day, saying, "Surely the land on which your foot has trodden shall be an inheritance for you and your children forever, because you have wholly followed the Lord my God." So here we see that Caleb shows he has great faith in the power of God. Caleb was the kind of guy that looked at the world through the eyes of faith and didn't look at it as things appear in this world. And I'm wondering, where was Caleb at when the covenant with the Gibeonites was made? It would have been great to have his insight in here, because this seems to be the guy that looks at the world through eyes of faith. Okay, what's God going to do because God is so powerful? How is he going to act? Not one who goes simply by appearances. And when he came back from spying out the land, he said, "I told the people exactly what was on my heart. I was fully convinced that God was powerful enough to give us this land. I really believed in the power of God. I was persuaded that God was going to do what he said he was going to do." And he spoke from his heart openly and without any fear. As a matter of fact, let's look briefly at exactly this story. If you have your Bibles, look at Numbers chapter 13. Numbers chapter 13, I want to just go back and look exactly at this account of him spying out the land. Verses 25 through 30. So Numbers 13, 25 through 30. Now, this is the account of when they went and spied out the land. At the end of 40 days, they returned from spying out the land. And they came to Moses and Aaron and to all the congregation of the people of Israel in the wilderness of Paran at Kadesh. They brought back word to them and to all the congregation and showed them the fruit of the land. Remember, they had taken a large cluster of grapes, so large that 2 men had to carry them on poles between themselves. So they brought back this huge cluster of grapes, and they showed him that. And they told him, we came to the land to which you sent us. It flows with milk and honey, and this is the fruit. So far, so good. It is what you said, land of milk and honey. And look at the fruit. Man, it's gigantic. This is great. So it starts off well, but verse 28. However, the people who dwell in the land are strong, and the cities are fortified and very large. And besides, we saw the descendants of Anak there. The Amalekites dwell in the land of Negeb. The Hittites, the Jebusites, and the Amorites dwell in the hill country. And the Canaanites dwell by the sea and along the Jordan. So you can see they come back with this report. Yeah, it is a land flowing with milk and honey. And here's a grape. And all of a sudden they just launch into this. And Caleb's listening to this whole thing. And he says right here in verse number 30. Now, I don't think he said, shut up. My Bible says he quieted the people. He may have said, just be quiet. So here, verse 30. But Caleb quieted the people before Moses and said, listen, let us go up at once and occupy it, for we are well able to overcome it. Yes, it's true. It is true there are giants in the land, but I believe in the power of God. He's going to give us this land. Come on, you guys, stop whining. Let's go. That's that's Caleb. That's his attitude. He had faith in the power of God. God's going to do what he says he's going to do. The other spies, as we continue reading on, they seem to be biased by their fears. Their fears led them to the decision that they made, not faith in the power of God. Look and continue reading in verse 31 and 33. Then the men who had gone up with him said, we are not able to go up against the people, for they are stronger than we are. So they brought to the people of Israel a bad report of the land that they had spied out, saying, the land through which we have gone to spy out is a land that devours its inhabitants, and all the people that we saw in it are of great height. And there we saw the Nephilim, the sons of Anak, who come from Nephilim. And we seemed to ourselves like grasshoppers, and so we seemed to them. You see what they were doing? They were focusing in on themselves, and they were not focusing in on the power of God. They were thinking only of themselves. Caleb says, wait a second, guys, stop complaining. God is all powerful. He promised us this land. He will give it to us. Let's go. They complained the whole time. They forgot how powerful their God was and looked only to themselves. When the spies came back with the report, Caleb didn't minimize the problems. It's true. There are giants in the land. That is true. There are fortified cities. Yes. So he didn't minimize the problems, but he magnified God in the midst of those problems. He said, our God is all powerful. He can do exactly what he wants to do. And I think that's sometime with us too. We start looking at the problems and we stop realizing exactly how powerful God is in the midst of our circumstances. All we see is the problem. We don't see the power of God. Caleb says, I believe God is powerful. I believe he'll do exactly what he says. We come to ourselves in the 21st century, and it just seems to me that our view of the power of God is limited. I think we intellectually understand. We know the Bible teaches God's all powerful. He can do all things. We understand that intellectually. But in the midst of a crisis, in the midst of a trial, in the midst of the time we're stepping out by faith and risking something great for God, we question, is he really all powerful? Is he really? And I think we have a tendency to limit the power of God in our lives of ourselves and the lives of the church, the lives of the people of God. I mean, look at Caleb, for example. He saw not only the deliverance from Egypt, he saw the parting of the Red Sea. He saw the manna that was miraculously given day by day to the children of Israel 6 days in a week. The seventh day they didn't have it. He saw this that was recorded in Deuteronomy chapter 8. Your clothing did not wear out on you and your foot did not swell these 40 years. They didn't need any new clothes for 40 years. He saw that. He experienced it himself. He saw the parting of the Jordan River at the flood stage when the nation of Israel crossed over on dry ground. He saw it all. He saw the destruction of Jericho, how God made the walls fall down simply because they were obedient to the command of God. He saw that all. Sometimes I think that we believe since the resurrection occurred, God doesn't display his power anymore. Now, granted, the resurrection was a wonderful display of God's power, but somehow we think that's it. God doesn't do powerful things anymore. He doesn't act on behalf of his people powerfully. He doesn't move where people have to say, that's not man, that's God. That must be God's power. Since the resurrection, somehow we get in our mind, oh, God doesn't display his power anymore. What I want is that we never become like the people of Nazareth. The people of Nazareth in Jesus' day had a certain characteristic that was described about them, and I hope we never get to that place as a people of God. Jesus comes and he preaches and he does a mighty work, and they're saying, well, who is this guy, Jesus? I mean, he's the son of a carpenter. We know Mary, his wife, and aren't his brothers and sisters around here with us somewhere? I mean, who is this guy that does this mighty work? Who is this Jesus guy? And then it's recorded exactly what is said about them. And they took offense at him, Jesus. But Jesus said to them, a prophet is not without honor except in his hometown and in his own household. And here's a place I never want us to come to as a people of God, both individually and as a church. I never want us to get to this place, what's described about them next. And he did not do many mighty works there because of their unbelief. I do not want to limit the power of God. Caleb says, I understand exactly how powerful God is, and I believe that God is powerful. He'll bring us into this land. He can overcome all obstacles in lives, and he will fulfill his promises. I don't ever want us to get to the point where it's said among us, and God didn't do many mighty things in Medical Aid Community Church because of their unbelief. I don't want us to get there. Another thing about Caleb that we see in this text, not only did he have faith in the power of God, he had faith in the promises of God. Look at verse number 9. I've already read that, but I'll reread it again, 9 through 11. So he goes out as spies. He comes back, gives a good report. Now verse number 9. And Moses swore on that day, saying, surely the land on which your foot has trodden shall be an inheritance for you and for your children forever. You personally, Caleb, this promise is to you, because you have wholly followed the Lord my God. And now, behold, the Lord has kept me alive. Now Caleb is speaking again. And now, behold, the Lord has kept me alive, just as he said, these 45 years since that time, or the time that the Lord spoke this word to Moses while Israel walked in the wilderness. And now, behold, I am this day 85 years old. I am still as strong today as I was in the day when Moses sent me. My strength now is as my strength was then, for war and for going and for coming. Caleb had faith in the promises of God. That promise that came to him through Moses, the place that you walked on when you spied out the land, I'm going to give you that. That's my promise to you, Caleb. Do you believe that? Do you believe I can keep you alive all of these years and bring you into a land that has been promised to you? Do you believe that, Caleb? Caleb said, I believe with all my heart. He had faith in the promises of God. When he went out to spy the land, one of the places that he went was Hebron. He spied out that land. He walked through that place. And now at 85 years old, Caleb still had great faith that God would keep his promises. The promises that he made to Israel. He's 85 years old. He has seen a lot in the last 45 years. He has seen the people go through the desert complaining, whining to God, and dying off because of unbelief. He has seen the crossing in now to the promised land and years of war that have taken place to inherit the promises. He has seen a lot. But he still believes that God's going to keep his promises. It gives us a little timeline also here exactly how long it took to take the promised land. How long were the wars that we read in 10, 11, and 12? How long did it take? We really lose track of time because there's really no time references in there. But we have a time reference right here. See, the promise that was made to Caleb came 2 years after they left Egypt. So 2 years into their wandering came the promise. They wandered a total of 48 years, so that's another 38 years. So Caleb is now 85. He was 40 when the promise was made. So you take 45 minus 38, that comes up to 7 years. So 7 years have transpired since chapter 10, 11, and 12 have taken place. It kind of gives us an idea how long it took him to conquer the land. It wasn't just a matter of months, it was years, 7 years, up to this point right here. So 7 years have come up to this point. Caleb was motivated by faith, not only in the Lord's promise, but also the great task that was ahead of him. That seemed to motivate him. He seemed to say, yes, the task is going to be difficult, but I believe in the promises of God. If he promises it, he'll fulfill it because I believe in the power of God. So the task that lay ahead of him was great. And he says, that's great. That encourages me. That motivates me. That challenges me. Now, most likely, none of us have ever received a promise like this that Caleb received. This exact promise, okay? The place that your foot walked on, I promise to give you that as an inheritance. I'm going to keep you alive the whole time, and you're going to make it into the promised land, and I'm going to give you this land. Now, none of us have ever received a promise like that. I mean, we haven't. In other words, through God saying, through my power, you will live to possess the land that I promise you. We've never received a promise just like that. But this promise that was made to Caleb, this promise comforted Caleb. If you think about it, it comforted him as he wandered through the desert with the children of Israel. He knew he was going to survive. He knew he would make it to the promised land. He's going, another year, I'll make it. I'm going to make it in. So the whole time that they're wandering, that last 38 years in the wilderness, he knows God's going to keep his word. That promise comforted Caleb. The promise also encouraged Caleb in the time of his trials. In the time when the people complained to God and all the battles he had to fight, it was a great encouragement to Caleb to know in these difficult circumstances, they're not always going to remain the same. They will change. Things won't always be as they are. So it was a great encouragement to Caleb, this promise that was made to him. Not only that, this promise was a motivation to Caleb. It motivated him to act. It didn't motivate him to sit down and say, okay, God, now you do it. No, God called Caleb to do it. And it motivated him to act on this promise that God made to him, knowing that the power of God was with him to fulfill exactly what God had called him to do. Now, none of us have ever received a promise that specific, just like that. But you know, God has made special promises to us in the Word of God, specific promises to his people. For example, God acts in our lives beyond what we ever could imagine he can do. So imagine something so great and magnificent that only God can do. You got it? Think about it. Now God can go beyond that. Did you catch that? You imagine something so great that you say, only God can do. Imagine it. God can go beyond that. He promises he can go beyond everything that we possibly can imagine that he can do in our lives. He can exceed that. Ephesians chapter 3. Now to him who is able to do far more abundantly than all that we ask or think, according to the power at work within us. Another promise God has given to us. God gives us all things we need to really live that abundant life that Jesus promised and to really be holy people. He's given us everything. We lack nothing. We lack nothing to be really living life and being holy. He says in 2 Peter 1, his divine power has granted to us all things that pertain to life and godliness. Through the knowledge of him who called us to his own glory and excellence, he has given us all things to live this abundant life. He's given us all things to live holy lives, lives separated from sin and dedicated to God. He's given us everything we need. That's his promise. The next promise he makes to us is God promises to empower us for our spiritual battle that we fight. And every one of us fights one. We don't fight with flesh and blood. That's not the battle that we're engaged in. We're engaged in a battle against spiritual forces in the heavenly places, against demonic forces that want to destroy you and me and the church. That's what our battle is. And God says, I have empowered you to fight this battle. I've given you weapons that are not man-made weapons. In 2 Corinthians, for the weapons of our warfare are not of the flesh, but have divine power to destroy strongholds. God empowers us to fight this spiritual battle. We do have special promises given to us, many more that we can find throughout the Bible. Caleb understood. He had great faith in the promise of God. He believed God would keep his word. The last thing we're going to see here is that Caleb had faith in the presence of God. He had faith in the presence of God. Verse number 12 and on down to the rest of the chapter. So he had faith in the power of God. God would fulfill his promise and bring the people into the land. He had second faith in the promise of God, that specific promise that God made to him. Verse number 12. So now give me this hill. Give me this hill country of which the Lord spoke on that day. For you heard on that day how the Anakim were there with great fortified cities. He's just repeating what he said in Numbers 13. It may be that the Lord will be with me and I shall drive them out just as the Lord said. Then Joshua blessed him. I can imagine there's probably a smile on Joshua's face at this time. He's thinking back to that promise that God gave him through Moses. Yeah, I remember, Caleb. I remember that. I remember exactly what God said to you. Here it is, Caleb. God bless you. Take that mountain. Then Joshua blessed him, and he gave Hebron to Caleb, the son of Jephunneh, for an inheritance. Therefore, Hebron became the inheritance of Caleb, the son of Jephunneh, the Kenizzite, to this day, because he wholly followed the Lord, the God of Israel. Now, the name of Hebron formerly was Kiriath Arbor. Arbor was the greatest man among the Anakim, and the land had rest from war. You heard that word Anakim a couple of times. That's simply, they are a race of giants. They're giant people. They're really big. You can imagine how hard it would be. He's looking up at this mountain, and Caleb says, I want that mountain. And Joshua's going, but there's giants up there. They're really big. Not only that, you have to fight uphill to fight against the giants, to get up to the mountain area. Are you sure, Caleb, you want that? And Caleb says, I want that mountain. I don't care if there's giants up there. I want that mountain. He was so passionate. He believed in the promises of God. He believed that God would go with him to conquer that mountain filled with giants. Didn't make any difference to him. God had kept Caleb alive all of these years and had given him a glorious promise. So what if there were giants on the mountain? That was his land. That was the promise God made to him. Faith in God's promise, you notice, did not make Caleb passive, but brought him to an active obedience. So faith in God's promises is not expressed by human passivity, but by acts of obedience to God. It doesn't mean we get a promise from God, we just sit down and wait for God to do it. No, God says, I want you to do that. He said, Caleb, that's your land, but you go take it. Caleb said, I want that mountain. I want that mountain. There's no doubt with Caleb. It seems like, oh, may the Lord be with me. No, he's saying God has been with me in the past. He's with me now. He'll be with me when I fight for that mountain that he promised me. God's with me. You know, I think sometimes for us, we lack boldness in our Christian life. We lack boldness because we cannot see that God is with us. God has called us to some great task and say, step out. I want you to risk something great for me. And we say, yeah, God, that sounds great, but how do I know you're really going to be with me in this thing? And we become shy, become timid, and we withdraw back. I think we lack boldness often because we can't see that God is with us. During World War II, Pastor Cage Munk, a Danish pastor, spoke out against the Nazi annexation of Denmark. And he said this to a bunch of fellow pastors. This is how he said it. We stand as a temple of the holy God. All others have their obligations to this or that. We alone have our obligation to the truth. When justice or injustice is at stake, then we must never ask whether it is worth it, for then the devil always wins. On these issues, it is always worthwhile to fight. What we as a church lack is most assuredly not psychology or literature. We lack a holy rage. And in January 1944, the Nazis took him out into a field and filled his body with bullets. But he says, this is not right, what's going on. And he had a holy rage to stand up and to speak about a moral evil in his society. This is not right. I think we lack we lack this holy rage. Somehow we just allow these things to take place in society and we don't think anything about it. We allow these things to take place in our neighborhood. We don't think anything about it. We lack a holy rage to stand up and say, this is not right. It's wrong. Moral courage is what's needed today to stand up against the evil of our society. We need a holy rage. Chris Cordelais, he's a high school senior in Pennsylvania. This is in 2001 in Associated Press. He wanted to display the 10 Commandments on his locker at school. So he put the 10 Commandments up, and the principal asked him to take it down, citing separation of church and state, which is a bunch of lie. Just easy, it's the way to say it's a lie. So Chris came up with another ingenious plan. He made a sandwich board and posted 5 of the 10 Commandments on the front and 5 of the 10 Commandments on the back, and he wore his poster board to school. And the principal said, okay, I respect his opinion. I may disagree with it, but I respect his opinion. He can continue to wear it. That was a creative thought on how to get his views of truth, moral truths in society, the Ten Commandments. What we tend to lack today is a holy rage against evil. We just allow it to take place. You may say, why is Hebron such an important city? And I don't know if Caleb was even thinking about this at the time. I'm not sure. Maybe he was. I think he probably was. This is my opinion. Why is it such an important city? Well, the reason why it's so important, if you go back and look in the history of the nation of Israel, the three major patriarchs of the Israelites, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, are all buried at Hebron. They're all buried there. That's their burial place, the origin of the Jewish people in Abraham. God calling him out to go to a place he'd never been before and making a nation out of him. He's buried right there. And I can imagine for Caleb, the constant reminder of God's faithfulness was seen in the life of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And he says, I want that place. Sarah, Rebekah, and Jacob's wife Leah are also buried in this place. Caleb wholly followed the Lord, and God rewarded him, blessed him for that, kept him alive, fulfilled his promise, because Caleb believed in the power of God. Caleb believed in the promise of God, and Caleb believed that God is going to be with him through this life. He believed all of that. When it comes to time that we need to step out and risk something great for God, there's three things we need to remember. Three things that we need to remember as we step out of our comfort zones, out of passivity and timidity, and say it's time for us to do something for God that's going to make a difference. Three things we need to remember. Number one, God's power is available to us. The one who created everything we see by the word of his mouth, that power he has given to us. It's available. Is anything too hard for God? No. Then why do we think, God, I can't do that. I can't step out by faith and do what you're calling me to do. It's just too hard. I can't do it, God. I'm not sure if I have the power. You don't. That's a good thing. But God does. The second thing you remember is God's promises stand firm. What he has promised, he will do. Those things that he has said, none of his words will fall to the ground without being fulfilled. He will keep all of his promises. Third thing is this. God's presence is always with us. God's presence is always with us. God's calling some of you, and I don't mean full-time Christian service. That's not what I'm talking about. It may be that, but that's not what I'm talking about when I say calling. He may be calling you to be a doctor, maybe calling you to be a lawyer, maybe calling you to be a dental hygienist, he may be calling you to be a pastor. Whatever God's calling is, or he may call you to volunteer for some ministry. Whatever it is that God's calling is for your life, that he's asking you today to step out by faith and to take a risk. That is your mountain. What is your mountain today? What is your mountain? What is it that God is calling you to do that you've just over your life said, God, I'm afraid to do it. I'm not going to step out. I don't really know if you're powerful enough to actually keep your promise. And I'm not sure if you'll actually be with me when I'm doing this. What is your mountain today? What is it that God is asking you to step out and risk something great for him? What is it? I don't know. I know what mine is. Sir Edmund Hillary was the first man that conquered Mount Everest, made it actually to the top of the summit. What you may not have known is the first time he tried to make it up, it was a disaster. Two of the people that went up with him died. He barely made it down off the mountain himself. It was a complete disaster. When he got back to England, they asked him to come to the Royal Society to tell about his experience on Mount Everest. And so when he came into the Royal Society, he came up to the platform where he was about to speak. They had on the platform a picture of Mount Everest on a stand. So he walks up to the picture of Mount Everest with his back to the whole audience, him facing Mount Everest, looking directly at this with his back to the audience. He says in a voice that was steady and calm this, Mount Everest, I'm coming back and I'm going to conquer you because you can't get any bigger, but I can. Let me ask you, isn't it time to step out and take a risk for God? Isn't it time perhaps to have that holy rage where we have to stand up and say, this is not right. This moral evil in our society has to be addressed. We cannot allow injustice to continue on. What's your mountain? Perhaps it's time today to step out by faith and risk something great for God, like Caleb, who had faith in the power of God, in the promise of God, and in the presence of God. What a great man Caleb was. And when everything is said and done in the human history, I don't know if God is keeping records of what's going on right now. I don't know. I have no idea. But if he is keeping records of what's going on right now, is our name in that record? Exploits that we do for God, are our names recorded? Whatever your mountain is today, I challenge you, like Caleb, make a bold statement based on the power of God, the promise of God, and the presence of God, and say, give me that mountain. Will you have that dedication this morning? Whatever God's calling is, it's God's calling. Whatever God has asked you to do is God's business. It's not the same for each individual. But whatever it is that God has called you to do, and you have been hesitant, I ask you today, maybe during this time that I close in prayer and we worship in song, that you will make a conscious decision. I will step out by faith and risk something great for God. I'm tired of being passive and timid in my Christian experience. Let's pray together. Dear Heavenly Father, I am grateful to you that you have recorded in your word this man, Caleb. It wasn't necessarily that he had so great faith, Father. He had great faith in you. He had a great God that he could trust completely. God that never failed him. God that always kept his promises. God that made great promises. I mean, the promises beyond anything Caleb could ever have imagined. Promises that carried him through for 45 years, struggle and hardship, difficulties. I just thank you for recording this for us. I thank you because it challenges each one of us to get out of our comfort zones, to get out of the box that we've made for ourselves, the status quo, Father, that we have somehow built into our lives because we're afraid to risk something. Help us today, Father, with your power, based on your promises and your presence, to step out and do something great for you. Because in the end, Father, you receive all the glory. It's you. It's not that we have done anything great. It's you. You did it. It's your power, your promise, your presence. So, Father, we want to glorify you in what you do through us. May we be dedicated to step out and risk something great for you. In Jesus' name, amen.